Hi, everybody. Welcome and thank you for joining our webinar today. I want to give a quick disclaimer. This webinar is being recorded. It's open to public record requests. Please do not disclose any confidential or sensitive information during the call. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Carol Good, who has joined us from University of Washington today to present. Hi, Carol.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here to provide what little support I can during this highly stressful time for everyone. So I just want to start off by sharing a little bit about who I am. I'm Carol Good, and I work at the University of Washington at the Barnard Center for Infant Mental Health and Development. My career has been spent supporting families that have children between the ages of birth to 6 in kind of traumatic situations. And so just knowing right now in our current state of pandemic, and we're all being isolated, we're all in a state of trauma right now. So I'm hoping that the information I share today will be helpful to you. Just knowing that everyone's going through this in their own way. So with that in mind, we'll proceed. If I can find there we go. Okay, so to start with, what the foundation of really what we're going to be looking at today is really looking at our children and ourselves through a social and emotional needs context. So right here I have a list of social emotional needs, and you'll notice it says of early childhood, but in reality, these needs never go away from us as we continue through the life cycle. So we all have a need to feel safe and secure. And during this time, we just know everyone's sense of safety and security is being rocked off of the foundation, right? Like, just knowing it's not safe to be around people we care about. Some of us have financial insecurities, all those things. So we as adults aren't feeling safe. And because of that, then we know when our children sense that we're not feeling safe, it increases their sense of safety and security too. So I'm going to go through these in more detail as we go along, but this is just the overview of it. That we all have a need to feel worthy and loved, acknowledged and understood, feel noticed and receive attention, have a sense of predictability, and all of us, I know our schedules have all become very unpredictable, and that's impacting adults as well as children. We're all having feelings of distress. Nothing really feels in our control anymore. And we'll talk more about being stimulated in exploration and feeling competent. But the goal, the overall goal is, as we go through this traumatic event, is that we continue to maintain our mutually enjoyable relationships and still feel a sense of belonging, both inside our homes and to our greater community. So before we launch into talking more about the social and emotional needs, I wanted to take a moment and just talk a little bit about what happens in the brain and how the brain develops, but then also what happens in our brains when we're feeling high levels of stress or distress. So you'll notice that there's different colors on this brain, and the red part of the brain indicates our brain stem. And that's the part of our brain that develops first. So when we're first born, that's the part that's usually highly organized, has good functioning, typically. It's the part that regulates all our basic bodily systems, right? So our heart rate, our blood pressure, our ability to make movements, things like that. And then if we go up a little higher in the brain, that's the part of our brain that we often think of as our emotional center of the brain. And it regulates our emotions. It also has systems in the brain that their job is to kind of scan our environments for danger. This is where probably a lot of you have heard fight, flight, or freeze. That's the system that's in place in this middle part of our brain. And then as we go up and you notice the green parts of our brain, that's the part of our brain we use for higher level thinking, right? So our learning, our reflecting on things in life, our ability to plan and learn. So that's the top part of the brain. And I don't know if anyone's ever heard of Dan Siegel, but he's one of my brain heroes because he taught me how to look at the brain in a very simple way. And that is if you take your fist and you put your thumb on the palm of your hand and then close your fingers over top of your thumb, it gives you a nice model for the brain. Whereas your wrist becomes your brain stem, your thumb is your middle emotional part of your brain, and your fingers become your thinking brain. And what happens in our brains when we become in a highly distressed situation, we do what's called flipping our lid. Dan Siegel calls it flipping our lid. So our thinking brain goes offline and we drop to either the middle or the bottom parts of our brain. So as many of you have probably noticed in the last month or so, there might be moments in your day you notice your heart rate increasing. Some of us might have gotten headaches and things from high blood pressure recently. There's also a system in our body that sometimes makes us, have to use the restroom more often, that kind of thing. So just know that that's connected. And we also drop to the middle part of our brain, which remember I had said kind of becomes on heightened alert and starts to scan for danger. And so this is where we can become much more kind of hyper vigilant and more emotional. So we might be more irritable than we normally are. We might be more demanding than we normally are. Some of us may feel like we just need things to be really concrete and basic and simple. And some of us might also just kind of go offline. But anyway, so we're not able to think. And what we know is in order to be able to bring our thinking brain back down, we have to be able to kind of get to calm. So if you think about how this is likely showing up in you as an adult in your daily life these days, you may be able to relate to that. That there might be times you're more emotional, irritable, just want to have lots of control over things. And the reality is our children are no different. So with that in mind, let's think about then what happens, like I said, in the brain. So when we have unmet social emotional needs, which given this time of high distress, it's very hard to get our emotional needs met. Actually, before I do that, I just want to pause and see if anybody has any questions just about that brain piece that I was talking about. And I'm hoping that my co-administrators will help me see if there's questions.
Hey, Carol. So right now we don't have any questions particular to the brainstem that you're talking about.
Okay.
However, Mary Beth, I saw your question about downloading the PowerPoint. We are recording this entire presentation and that will be made available at the end of this. We'll be posting it. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Okay. So if there aren't any questions, I'll keep going. So when we think about those unmet social emotional needs, we all feel distress. And then in children, well, with adults as well, our brains tend to go one of two ways. We kind of withdraw and kind of shut down, which for adults, that often means we kind of turn inward. We might not feel like talking very much. We might want to just veg out in front of TV, that kind of thing. Or we act out, we might, again, kind of lash out at people verbally, or we might do other behaviors that are kind of acting out behaviors for adults, maybe drinking more than we normally would, or doing something like that. So for young children, that social withdrawal can look like maybe not wanting to play as much as they normally would, wanting to be really close and clingy. They too sometimes will just kind of stare off, right? Just shut down. They might sleep more than they normally would. That's the other thing adults will do sometimes. And then aggression in children looks like throwing things more, maybe having more tantrums than usual, maybe hitting. You know, if you have a child that didn't normally hit and they're hitting more now, that's their language of distress. So every human is unique, and their brains find their own unique strategies for coping with distress. But generally, it's either a withdrawal or an acting out behavior. So I thought we added this little video just to bring a little bit of lightheartedness into this conversation. But it's also helpful because when we think about what we call regulation, emotional regulation, that ability to manage our upset feelings. So in children, where I said that middle part of their brain that's just coming online, that starts to develop during toddlerhood, so the emotional part of the brain. That's why toddlers get such a bad rap as being, you know, the terrible twos. They're really not terrible. It's just that their brains have so much wiring happening in the emotional part of their brain that they just are highly emotional. And over time, our brains wire to the ability to learn to regulate or handle those emotions, and then eventually can wire up into the thinking parts of their brain. But the thinking parts of the brain don't really start to come online until 2.5 at the earliest. And so if you have a child under the age of 2.5, really all you're dealing with is a child that's at the middle and the bottom parts of the brain. Once in a great while, you'll get lucky and they'll be able to follow directions and stop when you ask them to stop. But it's just at this point a random thing that sometimes the brain can do it and sometimes they can't. So as adults, we've just had lots and lots of practice regulating those emotions, learning to manage them, so we don't have tantrums. But here is a video of an example of what it might look like if our brains behaved like young children's brains and we didn't have that ability to cope. Oops. There we go. So with that, some of those behaviors might feel familiar to you, of things you see your children doing. And you also probably relate to some of those similar feelings we all have. And again, just as adults, we've learned, okay, when my bills come in the mail, it's not going to help really just to throw a big old fit. Although sometimes we will throw fits still, but maybe not quite the same as our toddlers or our young children do. So even though these are behaviors we mostly see in toddlers, something important to remember is for 4, 5, and even some 6-year-olds, and even some children that are older than that, because the wiring in the brain is still fairly new, it can go offline quicker and easier than for us as adults. So it's not surprising if you're seeing your older children have some tantrums that feel reminiscent of when they were toddlers, just because their brains just haven't had enough practice of regulation. And during this time of high stress, they may be dropping to their brain just more frequently. Okay, so now I'm going to launch in, and I'm just going to say, Emily, or if you can just interrupt if there's a question, I'm just going to go through these next social emotional needs, but there's several of them. So if any of them warrant questions, please feel free to step in with a question. So the first one is, again, feeling safe and secure. And so when we're in a normal world, right, hopefully our household makes us feel safe. We're able to go out into the world and feel safe. And as parents, we're able to do this pretty well. What the unique situation in this case is that many times as adults now, we're not really feeling safe. And our children have this keen ability. Our brains were really designed to kind of be connected in a really nonverbal way, in a more like body experiential way, to regulate each other. And so when we're feeling unsafe, our children can just feel that. And so it just shakes their sense of safety and security without anything really happening to them. So, your household may not have been necessarily impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, other than you can't leave. But it doesn't matter. Your child still feels the same sense of unsafety, if that's a word, as you do. And so the thing we have to do is really pay attention to, how do we create that sense of safety in our homes? How do we provide that sense of comfort and security for children, even when we might not be feeling that way? This is one of those times, sometimes we have to try to fake it till we can make it. But you also want to pay attention to what sort of outside influences is the child being exposed to. So if you're somebody that's really feeling the need to watch the news or watch videos to stay up to date, just being really mindful of how much exposure your children is getting to that, your children are getting to that, because even though they might not act like they're paying attention, they can sometimes feel the emotion coming from people being interviewed or that kind of thing. So in some ways, you have to kind of protect them from some of those outside influences. And we're going to talk more about the structuring my day and that kind of thing. But just knowing your child, depending on who your child is, your child's probably going to need more comfort than usual, because really, don't we all need more comfort than usual these days? So just knowing, okay, I might have to spend a little extra time helping them get ready for bed, or tucking them in, or having them sit on my lap, or having story time together, or something that wouldn't be normally occurring outside of this distressful time. So we all have a need to feel worthy and loved as well. And so again, our children can sometimes, young children misinterpret things. And so your feelings of stress and if you're feeling irritable or that kind of thing, children have a way of taking that very personally. And so they can often feel like it's their fault that you're feeling distressed. They don't always understand this larger context to our distress. So just making sure you're communicating in some way and helping them understand how special they are to you. You can do that by even noticing when they're quiet, which sometimes feels counterintuitive to parents, because you think, oh, they're off playing by themselves. I'm going to take advantage of this moment and just go, do my dishes, or make that phone call or something like that. But just know, if the more we do that, our children can feel like they're not important to us, or that we're trying to avoid them in some way. And when children feel that, they tend to seek us out more. So I often tell parents that even though it feels like, oh, if I go and I check on them and just let them know I know they're there, and I'm interested in what they're doing, and they might need to come get a little fill up, in the long run, it's going to help them feel more secure to play independently. I hope that makes sense. We all also have this need to feel acknowledged and understood. So young children, again, because they're so new to this world, don't even always understand the feelings they're having. They don't always have words for the feelings they're having. And so the more we can respond and use our tone of voice, our facial expressions, our words to describe what we think they're feeling, even our best guess, even if we're wrong, they'll still feel like we're trying to help them feel acknowledged. And accepting all their feelings, even the negative ones. And that's really, really hard to do. Easier said than done. I realize that, especially when we're feeling stressed, that all we want children to do is just, can you just follow my directions? Or can you just go play quietly for a few minutes? And yet, young children can't always do that without our help. So we all need to feel noticed and receive attention too. And I know every family is going through this situation in such a unique way. I know there's families that are trying to balance work and raising their children. Some are trying to figure out the whole school thing and care for other people in their family that need care and that kind of thing. So just to normalize, there may be less amounts of time to provide this attention, but to think of that feeling noticed and giving attention, think about it in the context of quality over quantity. That if you can spend a few minutes, right, maybe even 5 or 10 minutes of undivided attention with your child a few times through the day, that will be enough to kind of fill their cups, hopefully, and some days might be better than others. But filling their cups so that then they might be able to have a little bit more independence. And that's the case for maybe 2.5 and up. When you have if you have a child under the age of 2.5, really the expectation they can do much of anything independently for more than, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes, which may feel like a lot, is kind of unrealistic. But for those that are 2.5 and up, again, if you can fill, I sometimes think of it as their gas tank. If you can fill their loving gas tank with some attention, then they're able to drive a little bit on their own until their gas tank becomes empty and you have to fill it again. And so then the other piece too is when they're having negative behaviors, reminding yourselves that that negative behavior is their language of distress. So that's telling you they're needing something from you. And the sooner you can respond to it, the more likely they'll be able to get regulated again and get back into doing something that will then allow you to time to do something. Also, I just wanted to point out this, appreciate my accomplishments and my efforts. I think that idea, we all have to be mindful of that in our own lives too, just that we're all doing the best we can in just a very highly unique and stressful situation. So I think we all need to take the time to acknowledge on a given on a daily basis or even a moment-to-moment basis, like, okay, what did I just do here that was helpful to both myself and my child? And my child needs to hear that from us too, like, oh, you know, that was really helpful when you colored that picture so mommy could make her phone call. Things like that to really help them feel like you're noticing when they're doing well too. We all have yes?
Really quick, we've got a question just from Janet Brady asking, are there any special considerations for only children?
Oh, interesting. Well, my guess is she probably knows what the special considerations are, in that when you have multiple children, you just have more hands on deck, and you have other siblings that can kind of help fill each other's cups. And at the same time, when you have multiple children, it sometimes creates more fires you have to put out. So I'd say there's like positives and negatives to it. I think when you have an only child, just know, you know, they're not going to have anyone else but you to spend time with. So there's that. And those with multiple children, just know there's going to be times you can spend time with all your children together, and then each child will need some individual attention too, maybe not as much as the whole. But so with an only child, just know you may have to do more frequent filling of the gas tank. I've heard of great strategies of some families that have only children that have tried to build connections with other families of their friends, right? Where they can do kind of little phone calls or video things where they're just playing, almost playing side to side. So whatever your child's interested in, if they have a playmate that's interested in those same things, kind of scheduling like a Zoom call or a FaceTime or something for them to spend time together playing distantly, but they can show each other what they're building or what they're playing. I would say if I had an only child, that would be a strategy I would probably do just to give myself a little bit of a break. Or other family members, right? If grandma or grandpa are available to schedule like a Zoom call. I know someone who is a grandma who said like every day at a certain time she is doing a FaceTime call with her grandchild, and she's asking her grandchild to just show her things like, show me all of your stuffed animals and tell me about them or stuff like that. So I think with an only child, you may have to call in more of your resources. But I think that's true with any size family. I hope that answered the question. Okay, so the sense of predictability, our predictability is just, everything we used to know in the world is kind of out the window right now. So with that, thinking, how do you create some sort of predictability in your household at this time? Again, there is not a one-size-fits-all predictable routine for every family. It's up to each family because every family is unique, right? Some families just love mornings and some are night owls, and there's everything in between. And so really figuring out how do we structure our days that works for our family. And not, when we say predictability, we're not saying it has to be exactly the same every day, but for the most part, there's some sort of routine in your day. We get up, we have breakfast, we do our bath time, we get dressed, or we get up, we have some playtime, then we have breakfast a little later in the morning, and then we have playtime or that kind of thing. And it's not that it has to be exactly the same. You might have, okay, in the morning after breakfast, we get kind of free time, and we might do this, this, or this, right? And then we have lunch around the same time every day. But just know that there's no one size fits all for any family. Let's see. Giving choices is really important during this time because it helps children feel like they get some say in how their day goes, particularly if you're trying to get some work done as a parent. Trying to think, okay, so here's this hour-and-a-half block of time that I'm going to try and get some work done. I'm going to give my child maybe 3 options of things they can do. And when they do one, then maybe I can give them the other 2 or add in another one, right? So that they have some options of things to do. And then just remembering all young children need to be reminded of the rules and expectations. And right now, all of their sense of what they used to know about the world's been thrown out the window too. They used to go to childcare, or they had mom all to themselves, or that kind of thing. And so they always needed gentle reminders about rules and expectations. Again, because our brains just haven't had long enough on the earth to be able to remember things as well as we can when we're adults. And even when we're adults during times of stress, we forget things too. So just know they're going to maybe need more reminders about the rules and what's happening. Every day you might have to wake up and remind them about what you're doing that day and what the expectations are and what things are going to look like. The other thing that young children can find really helpful is using pictures to help them know what the flow is going to be. So even using your phone camera or something to take pictures of what you do on any day. And then you can kind of create I don't know, maybe like a little picture story about what that's going to look like. So then when your child's like, what am I doing next? You can be like, oh, go look at the picture. What's coming next? That kind of thing. We all need to be able to understand and manage our upset feelings. Again, for young children, this is hard any day. And then throw in that you have a parent who might be having a hard time managing their upset feelings, and it's just going to be harder. So again, just reminding everyone, you're doing the best you can. Lowering expectations, I think, can be helpful both for ourselves and our children. But what we want children to do is understand, of course, this is hard. And of course, they're having big feelings about this. And as the adult in their life, you're going to help them get through it. That they can turn to you to get through this. That we're in this together, right? We keep hearing that, right? Because that's so important to remember. We're not alone, and our children need to remember that too. They're not alone in these big feelings. That we can handle them. That we can get through the big feeling. For young children, really young, like toddlers, and even up to maybe sometimes age 4, when they flip their lid and they're in the bottom parts of the brain, sometimes their feelings are so big they honestly feel like this is never going to end. This feeling's never going to go away. Some of us feel that way right now. But for young children, they feel that way often. So the more we can provide them with that sense of, oh, you're feeling really mad right now. That's okay. Your feeling will go away, and you will be able to have fun again at some point, right? This feeling will end, and we'll go back to playing with your cars or whatever the case may be. And then we have to figure out who is our child, right? Some children like to be comforted and soothed when they're having big feelings. Some children are like, don't come near me when I'm having a big feeling. And if you think about it in your own life, if you're feeling really mad at someone because they did not let you do something you really wanted to do, and then they come and offer you a hug, you probably don't feel like giving them a hug. And so our children are no different. So really learning about how my child needs to be connected to me, but is that through my voice? Am I just saying, I know you're really mad, and you can watch that show later when it's time for TV time or whatever the case may be. So acknowledging it, and others, pulling them in, letting them cry on your shoulder until they get it all out and they're able to move back on. And so that is the other thing that, we're all going to be getting lots of practice about how to learn to express our feelings in ways that are okay. And so if you think about that, this is a lovely time to be practicing that, and a really important time for children and us as adults to be learning, what are my strategies for expressing feelings? What are our family values about that? What's okay to do when we're feeling really upset, and what's not okay to do? And every family, again, has different values about that. And so again, as a family, it's something to think about. What's going to be okay to do when we're angry? Some families, it's perfectly fine to yell at each other. That's just part of the culture. Other families, that's not okay, and we do different things. So you have to figure out what do we want to teach our child about how to handle these big feelings. We all need to feel a sense of control, and right now, because so much is out of our control, we really have to focus on what do we have control of, right? The only thing we have control of is what happens inside our houses. Ultimately, right now, that's all we have, or what happens inside my body, right? I can try to take some control of that. So ways to help your children feel like they have some control, giving them as many choices about things they can have a choice about. They can choose what they wear. Who cares what they look like? They're not going out in public anyways. Choosing what activities, again, you can give them some limits to their choices, but that they can choose within those limits. Or, what time of day for maybe a little preschooler, what time of day do they want to have be their TV time? Do they want it to be before bed, or right when they wake up, or right after lunch, or that kind of thing?
Carol, we've got another question here. How to deal with feeling like I'm not doing enough for my child during this time. I know there is only so much I can do, but I still feel guilty some days.
Yes. Well, so I would say acknowledging that, and we're going to talk more about that in a minute, but just acknowledging and finding your own mantra for you're doing the best you can. And the good news in this is, remember I said the goal is for us to have our relationships intact, right? Like our mutually enjoyable relationships intact after this, and for your children to feel like they can turn to you. Just know that there's decades worth of research, over 50 years worth of research around parent-child relationships. And what we know is it does not require parents to be perfect, right? And so what the research really shows is if parents can respond in a mostly sensitive way and try to be supportive, like 60% of the time, 70% is fabulous. That's enough, right? That's enough. Our children get enough out of that to maintain that relationship. So really cutting yourself slack in this time, right? That you don't have to be perfect and you won't be perfect, and that your child doesn't need you to. There's actually good brain wiring that happens when when we can't really be super responsive to our children. They have to learn to cope by themselves for a little bit. We would never want a child to have to do that all the time, but on any given day, if we're not able to be responsive, it's okay. Our children learn um, how to respond, and we're going to talk about that here in a second too. So this exploration piece, I think, is really important. That idea that children are driven to learn and explore their world, and right now that exploration is really stunted, right? They don't have a lot to explore, and so just be thinking about how can you be kind of encouraging that in new ways. And so I know that there's been some like preschools and things online to encourage parents to do with their children. Just know the way I interpret that is it's not an expectation, but it's rather an invitation for you to have new ideas of things for your children to do. Because when children do feel stimulated in their exploration, that tends to be sometimes where their negative behavior comes out. They might be feeling bored or understimulated. And so if they have something new to do, that can reduce that, not permanently, but for a period of time. And so I think that's the reason there's been so much information out there about activities for parents to do with their young children, not because that's the expectation, but just knowing how quickly young children can become bored. So the other strategy is if you are in a house where you have a lot of toys, you might think about taking some of those and hiding them away in a closet for a week. So then in next week, you can kind of switch some of them out just so they have something new that they kind of forgot they had as a way to try to stimulate that exploration. Or even helping them, like I've seen a lot of posts online about families building forts, right? Just so it's new and different every day. What's our fort going to look like today? And what are we going to use for our fort? And so just finding those different ways of exploring. We all need to feel competent, right? Like we all need to feel like we're doing something well. And this is a piece for children to feel they need to hear from you what they're doing well. They all love to be your helper. Even if it's that you've got a pile of papers that you're ready to recycle, your child doesn't know that, you can say, oh, I need these really organized. You could spread them out and ask them, I need you to put those in a nice, neat pile for me. That's just going to help them feel like they're an important part of the family. And then again, the whole goal for this is just for us to be able to have mutually enjoyable relationships and to feel a sense of belonging. So that just requires now more than ever us being able to respond sensitively to my feelings and needs and attempt to interact with you. And if you're having to get some work done, I think as a nation right now, we just have to accept that people are going to get disrupted in their work, and that has to be all of our expectations. And if your employer doesn't have that expectation, have them watch this online, right? That we just can't expect children to meet our needs. It has to be the other way around, that we have to meet their needs. And again, I'm talking children birth to 5, that they just don't have the capacity to wait to get their needs met. So this is that power of repair that I was referring to earlier. That idea, nobody gets it right all the time, and thankfully we don't have to. But on any given day, we might have a hard time being in relationship with our children based on what's happening for us or how they're feeling on that day. And so when
Hey, Carol, are you still with us? Everybody, if you'll just hold for one moment while we resolve a couple technical errors. Hi, Carol, can you hear us now? Can you check your mic for us, Carol? Whoop, Carol, it sounds like we still don't have your mic on. Give me just one moment here to see if we can troubleshoot this. We see your visual and your presentation, but we're still having some audio issues. I am working on resolving it right now. Just hang on there for one more second. Everybody that is on this webinar, thank you for your patience while we get this taken care of. Hey, Carol, can I go ahead and while you are on visually, go ahead and also have you dial in? If you need me to send you that number, just give me like a thumbs up in your webcam or something. Or if you already have it, then you should be set to go. Okay, let me get that over to you. Everyone that's still on hold, if you need to take a quick stretch break or anything like that, we'll have her up in just one moment.
Hello?
Hi, can you hear
Okay.
us?
Yes,
Fantastic. We are back online. Carol, thank you.
sorry about that. Goodness.
That's all
But this
right.
is
Sometimes these technical things happen.
this is like a live example of how to regulate a distressing moment. Okay, so can you let me know where I cut off? Did you hear me talking at all about the power of repair?
I did hear you talking. I was actually looking for a pause point because I did have a question come up
Okay.
from Vanessa Baker asking if you can explain the difference between expectations, standards, or
Mhm.
rules and boundaries in terms of lowering our expectations while maintaining those rules and boundaries.
Oh, okay. So in some ways, rules and expectations are the same as rules and boundaries are the same as expectations. I think when I'm referring to our expectations, we have to lower our expectations of how well our children are going to be able to follow rules and boundaries. At this time, they're just more likely to fall into the bottom parts of their brain right now because of the stress everyone's under. So it's important to maintain some rules and expectations and actually it leads me to my next slide, or one of my next slides I'm going to go to. Wrong way. I'm going to jump ahead. We'll come back to this. This idea that we have to have clear expectations and have flexible limits, and at the same time, we have to just expect our children are going to protest, right? So that's that lowering expectations of, it's great to ask our children to clean their rooms right now, and we just have to realize some days they're not going to want to, and they're going to really protest about it. That doesn't mean you give in necessarily, but just that we expect them to, not be happy about doing it, have more emotion. And then the other thing, lowering our expectations about ourselves, that there might be some limit we just let go of at any given time because where we're at on any given day. That I'm going to go back to the slides I skipped over, that whole idea that if we want our children to be able to be calm and not be very emotional, that requires us to be able to be calm and not be very emotional. So yes, our children will always have strong feelings. Those strong feelings won't last as long if we're able to be calm, accepting of their feeling, kind of comforting, clear with our expectations, but accepting their feelings. So an example being, okay, so the expectation is you have to clean your room before you can do XYZ today. Our child might have lots of feelings about that. We acknowledge, I know you don't like it. I know you're mad at me. And that's my rule for today, right? If you're feeling up to it, but just knowing on any given day where your child's at, they might just feel strong feelings about that. And it's up to you to figure out, am I in a place where I can really stick with this limit today? Is this really a necessary limit for the day? Or am I just going to let this one go for today? That idea of we have to be, my mantra through all this is flexibility, flexibility, flexibility. I appreciate all of you being flexible with me losing my internet shortly. that idea that we have to think, is this something I really need to pursue? Or can I let this go for this period of time? So an example of that would be also, yeah?
So we have a
Yeah.
hand raised.
Okay.
If you're okay with that, we've got a hand raised. Karen, I've got you. I'm unmuting you now. I see your hand is raised. You have a question? Oh,
No?
all right. Well, Karen, if you want to throw that question into the comment section, you're welcome to. I also have another question from Jasmine. To the parents of
Okay.
to the parent of the only child, there's an app called Marco Polo, which is great for connecting. Lets you send videos, and my friends and family are sending videos of them reading books to my kids, and we can watch and
That's
rewatch
awesome.
at our leisure. My girls then record a response, polo or a book or story request, and my dad plays songs on the guitars too. Super easy app to use. So she just wanted to share that.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, so coming back to the whole concept of calming myself, calming my child. The other thing I was going to say about lowering expectations would just be, if you were thinking about, oh, my child might toilet train or ready to do a new thing that developmentally would be normally appropriate, now might not be the time to start on something like that, just depending on your stress level. So that's, again, another way to kind of change your expectations or lower your expectations. There will be plenty of time to do that once we are out of this current pandemic we're in. Okay, so calming myself, just that you have to find ways to be able to relax yourself, manage your own feelings. If you don't have strategies, it's really important to find something you can do, whether it's saying to yourself, you know what, I'm a good mom. So even though I'm feeling really frustrated with my kids right now, I'm still a good mom, or I'm still a good dad. And then repeating a mantra like, this will pass, this will pass, this tantrum will not last forever, right? And then we can help our children learn to do that for themselves. They can't do it on their own, right? So if we have a moment where we're feeling really frustrated, we might need to separate ourselves from our children for a bit. Right? But the goal isn't that our children will get themselves calm young, right? But that rather we go to a place where we can get calm, and then we can come back and help our children get to a place where they can manage their upset feelings with our help, and then with our help think about what else they can do, or what else they can eat if it's something that they are throwing a fit about in regards to eating. So some strategies will work for both you and your child. So that idea that counting together can sometimes help. Pretending to be a balloon and taking a deep breath and then blowing that all out. For kids and adults, one of the great activities to do can be blowing bubbles. Because if you blow bubbles, it requires you to have to take a big breath and have to blow it out slowly to make homemade bubbles, right? And use a wand to make a bubble wand if you don't have one. But that can be a great activity for just getting to calm. And then we talked about this encouraging cooperation in everyday moments. Again, when you're able to do most of these things most days, it's just going to set your kids up to want to cooperate with you. I think being open and honest with them about, what you have on your plate in any given day, and that this is going to be a hard day for us, and we're going to have to figure out how to get through it. Even children as young as 3 can understand that, right? And so then you can refer back. Remember how I said this was going to be really hard? This is why it's really hard. So again, linking back to those social emotional needs, that these are the things we all have a need for. And again, for parents, it's important for you to find ways to get these needs met in your own life. Maybe not on a daily basis right now, but certainly as much as possible. So making sure you're connecting with people that you enjoy, that make you feel loved, that are able to help you feel understood, is so important. So whether it's you're setting up phone calls with friends or that kind of thing once the kids are in bed, just to fill your cup or be able to process what feeling, that's so vitally important. And the only way you're going to be able to do it for your children is when you do it for yourself. That idea that we all know when we used to ride on airplanes and they would tell us you have to put your own oxygen mask on first, that totally applies for parenting. So I had a resource page that isn't showing up. But I had a couple of websites for more information. I think that's the app that the person referred to earlier was fabulous. There's also the Sesame Street workshop has Sesame Street Care or sesamestreet.org and then /caring. They have some, if you're interested in learning more about any of this content, there's a website called 0 to 3, all spelled out. So ZEROTOTHREE.org that has information on some of the similar content I've been reviewing here today. So yeah, so any questions?
Carol, we do have some people asking about where this recording will be available, and I just want to let everybody know that's listening. I will be showing a slide on the screen at the end of this webinar. Once Carol's presentation is done, I'll go ahead and put that up. Actually, we're at the end of your visual presentation, right, Carol?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'll get that up on the screen here in just a moment. Feel free to write that down. And that is one of the places where we will be uploading this presentation.
Carol, also Amanda was asking if you could repeat the websites you were just talking about, the Sesame Street one, the other one.
Okay, so it's sesamestreet.org with /caring. They had activities. And then 0 to 3.org, and 0 to 3 is all spelled out. So it's ZEROTOTHREE.org. And then there's another one called toosmall.org. So it's TOOSMALL.org.
Thank you. And Jasmine has her hand raised, so I'm going to unmute her so that she can ask her question.
Great.
Jasmine, go ahead.
Oh, I was actually just going to bring up that Marco Polo app. I couldn't find where to put a comment in, and then I didn't know how to unraise my hand. So.
Well, thank you, Mark. So it's Marco Polo. That's fabulous.
Yeah, it's almost talky.
Great.
So, cool.
So I'm hoping all of you can see my screen right now. Carol, is it showing on yours? Okay, so this is the Athena website. This link is actually for our COVID-19 page that we have been managing in light of the circumstances going on. That's where all of our COVID-19 resources are being, and that is also where you should find this webinar after we get it uploaded. Sorry, Carol, you were muted for a moment.
Okay, if anyone has any other questions for Carol, go ahead and send them in, and if not, we'll get ready to wrap up here.
All right, well, I'm not seeing any other questions coming up right now. Carol, I want to thank you so much for your time today. This has been a wonderful resource of information. I'm seeing in the comments, everybody's so thankful for your time. And it's just been a pleasure. Thank you so much. All right, goodbye, everybody.